Alen Takhsh. I know I'm mispronouncing your name. I'm calling you a premier Evanston immigration attorney. Alen, welcome to Lunch and a Divorce Lawyer.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. And you did excellent by pronouncing my name. Thank you.
I try. So you're an immigration attorney, Alen. So, I'm not guessing your age, or I know it's 2023, but you've been doing this for kind of how long, and sort of what's your story? Like, how did you end up doing what you're doing? Like, what kind of caused you to scratch that itch to become a immigration attorney, Alen?
Yeah, so I graduated law school in 2007, and I was licensed the same year. And so I've been practicing for about 15, 16 years. About 2010 is when I started focusing more on immigration law. But it was not until 2011 that I ventured off on my own. And I've been essentially primarily focused on immigration law since about 2014, 15. And so that is to say 100% of what I do is dedicated to immigration law. In terms of my history, I wasn't born in the United States. I was born in Iran. I was born in 1979, to be exact. I lived in Iran for 10 years. And things weren't particularly peachy for us. You know, we had, it was generally speaking quite difficult, especially the Iran-Iraq war, and not to mention being from a Christian minority group in Iran, because I am ethnically Assyrian Armenian. And so anyway, we went to Germany. I was in Germany for 3 years, and it took about that long for our paperwork to be processed by the US government. And in 1992 is when we came to the States. So it's been about 31 years or so that I've been here. And I say all of that to say that immigration is really part and parcel of who I am, and it's in my DNA, so to speak. But once I graduated college, went to U Chicago, majored in economics. I didn't want to have anything to do with immigration law whatsoever, law or immigration. As a matter of fact, I was intent on becoming an investment banker. But they say you often meet your destiny on the road you take to avoid it. And so while I was having certain plans about being a New York investment banker, the universe had other plans for me. And so here I am, many years later, an immigration lawyer in Evanston, Illinois.
Got it. The universe had other plans for you. Interesting statement. So here, I'm not asking you too much personal stuff, and dodge it if you need to. So then you're coming into the United States. Are you a sort of a refugee, or so that's totally tangential, or what are you in that situation? Because we're going to talk much more about maybe family-based and marriage-based, but I don't think you were in either of those boxes, or were you? I'm a immigration attorney neophyte.
That's exactly right. Yeah, we entered the United States as refugees, as Assyrian, Armenian Christians from Iran. We lived essentially as second-class citizens, and it was difficult. It was difficult for a lot of Iranians, but I would say especially so for certain minority groups. And the Iran-Iraq war had really exacerbated a lot of things in Iran. And once we got to Germany, things weren't particularly peachy either, because Germany is an interesting country because it's been grappling with its identity post-World War II. And I was in Germany when the Berlin Wall came down. And a lot of West Germans were saying not only should they rebuild the wall, they should make the wall taller. And so there was a lot of anti-foreign sentiment that was rampant in Germany at that time. Bore witness to neo-Nazis marching up and down the street. A home down the street had been attacked by Molotov cocktails. And so this notion of otherness or being an outsider is something that I am, for better or for worse, keenly aware of. I have intimate knowledge and experience with it. And so when I say that the universe had other plans for me, that is to say that based on my experience, the universe thought that I could be of service to others because of the things that I had gone through. And so when you experience trauma, there are two ways to go about it. One, you try to escape it or distance yourself from it as much as possible. The other is to embrace it, learn from it, grow from it, and then use it to help others. And so when we came to the United States, I entered as for all intents and purposes, a refugee child. But the funny thing is, my father, a former civil engineer, my mom, they never, ever made me feel like a refugee child. As a matter of fact, I walked around feeling like I was a prince or a king. And so that upbringing also solidified my self-worth and self-value. And as I grew older and became stronger and was able to make sense of some of those experiences, I was able to then turn around and be of service to others. And so here I am, immigration law.
Did you was Chicago your first, Chicagoland or whatever, your first stopping point in the United States, or was there, that's where you came to?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, a lot of Persians they tend to gravitate towards California. As a matter of fact, there are so many Persians in Los Angeles that they call Los Angeles Tehran Jeles sometimes. But we came here. My sister had moved from Philadelphia to Chicago. She was working at Motorola at the time, and then my brother ended up doing his residency at a local hospital here in Chicago. And so the first 3 months of my life, coincidentally, in the United States were spent in Evanston, which is where my office is located. Thereafter, we moved to Skokie. Then I moved to Chicago to attend the University of Chicago. And so I've essentially just been around here for the vast majority of the time that I've been in the States.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I was born in 74. What am I, 48, I guess? Almost 49. Yeah, I remember having a good friend. I don't know what the era of really a lot of Persian refugees coming. I distinctly remember in elementary school having a good friend who was Persian in Glenview, north suburbs.
Yeah, it makes sense that it matches the timing of when things were not particularly great in Iran.
Did you go? So the universe was talking to you, which was always nice. College to law school, consecutive, or is there a gap there when you were out with the big investment banks in New York pursuing that dream, or what was that path? Because I wasn't a straight to law school person either. I wasn't like the person who was dreaming about being a lawyer when I was 9. This isn't really supposed to be about me too much, but I was out living in Washington, D.C., working on Capitol Hill, and I thought, there are a lot of non-practicing attorneys out here. Maybe I'll go to law school. And then, knock on wood, since that time, right? I thought I was like running for Congress or something. I've really exclusively been a private practice, mostly family law attorney. So, I went on a different path too. So yeah, what was I'm guessing yours was like not the straight line path when you're 25 and graduating law school or something.
Yeah, exactly. As a matter of fact, once I graduated U Chicago, I didn't quite know what I wanted to do, and so I had always been told that I was eloquent, that I wrote well, et cetera, et cetera. And so I thought, you know what, let's give this law thing a chance. And so I ended up working at a law firm here in Chicago by the name of Gardner, Carton, and Douglas, which
Heard of
I
it.
later became Drinker and Biddle and Reith or something like that. Anyway, it was a fairly
Okay.
large law firm, but 200-300 attorneys. I was in their
Oh, wow.
Chapter 11 reorganization department. Um, just wanted to kind of get a feel for how attorneys operate and whatnot. And so after that, I took the LSAT, ended up going to law school, graduated. Um, it was right at the cusp of the economic recession, and so it was quite difficult to find really amazing jobs, if you will. And so I was
Right.
very lucky because I ended up working for Zurich North America for a couple of years in their quasi litigation department. And thereafter, I ended up working at a smaller immigration law firm. And shortly thereafter, after a brief stint there, I ended up establishing my own law firm, one Starbucks meeting at a time, one Panera Bread meeting at a time, and
Right.
and took on a bunch of different cases. But the vast majority of the cases tended to be immigration law anyway. But I would say
Hmm.
2014, 15 is when I really started to hone in on being known as a trusted resource for immigration law purposes.
Drill down into that. I might know, but I'm not sure I do. And I'm guessing there might be somebody watching or listening to this, right? You say immigration lawyer. Dig underneath that. So you're an immigration lawyer, and in your practice, you're doing X, Y, and Z. Fill in the blanks.
Yeah,
What are,
so
what are the big kind of crux immigration type matters you're taking on?
yeah, I would say a lot of family-based immigration law, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of humanitarian immigration law. Um, and that is to say that we don't really focus too much on employment-based immigration law cases or investment-based immigration law cases.
Okay.
What I do handle on a daily basis are family law. I'm sorry, immigration law within the context of a family, but that can involve somebody filing for asylum in the United States, somebody getting married to a US citizen and wishing to adjust their status, somebody who has been the victim of a crime and wishes to obtain a U visa and thereafter get a green card. A lot of Violence Against Women Act cases, VAWA
Hmm.
cases.
Hmm.
And so those are the vast majority of the types of cases that we handle. And if somebody does come to me with an area that I may not focus on, I have a fairly wide network. And so I'm able to
Sure.
guide that person in the right direction.
I was poking around your website in advance of chatting with you, and there was a blog post. There were two blog posts. I think one was timing of marriage based and timing of family based. Can you dig under those concepts a little bit? Because I'm a divorce and child custody attorney, so I'm in the family law land. What are those what are those scenarios? If I actually look deeper at those blog articles, what are those kind of code words, marriage based and family based? Could you speak to those a bit?
Yeah, and to some extent, they could be synonymous, but basically, when we talk about timing, um, we have to understand that at the end of the day, we are dealing with the US government. And and so um, timing is important because we may want to have a green card in our hands next week, but that is just not reality. Why? Because the government has to do its due diligence, its
Right.
background checks, and they're getting thousands upon thousands of applications every single day. And not only that, but there are emergent situations that arise that require the US government to take certain officers off of certain types of cases and dedicate these officers or relocate these officers to different areas. So, for example, if you have a humanitarian crisis
Right.
initiated by the fact that Putin invaded Ukraine and you have a
Right.
lot of Ukrainians coming, well, it's not like all of a sudden the US government has an extra 300, 400, 500 officers to dedicate to this emergent situation. No, they have a finite, a limited number of people that essentially do the work. So then they reorganize, they shift focus, and now you have somebody who, for example, is waiting for their green card to be processed or to be interviewed or to whatever. Now this person has to wait longer because the resources have been shifted in order to attend to certain emergent situations. That is a very simple example of what we mean when we say that there are delays that are sometimes beyond our control. You cannot control certain things. And so that's been one of the most challenging, I think, parts of my work, where I try to educate or provide insight to my clients as to why things are happening the way that they are. And I think I would say half of the time it feels as though I'm a clinical psychologist more than an attorney, right? And that's okay. That's what I signed up for. And I love the connection that I have with clients, because sometimes, quite frankly, they just want somebody to listen to them, to hear them out. And so timing and the delays with the US government has been or have been something that we've been dealing with on a daily basis, unfortunately.
Good point on the listening. I'm not so sure that's probably not the most valuable kind of service in some of the personal areas of law. I know that's a metric we actually look at a lot. It's just kind of like client wants to be heard. Like our phone system has actually good metrics on how the duration of phone calls. I mean, that's kind of sounds like inside baseball, but I actually do look at that pretty closely for myself and some of our team, because I think in family law, perhaps, as you just voiced in immigration, that it's like, much of the time it's just like, I want to be heard, right? I'm, client, I want to be heard. So I teed this up a little bit to you, Alen. This is real, right? My law firm, PRO Divorce Lawyers, we've been around since like 2012 now. And so you have a lot of former clients, and probably every couple months I'll get a call, and I'm playing to a little bit of the most common situation. It doesn't always have to be a 60-year-old guy, but I feel like oftentimes it is. It's a 60-year-old man here. I can think of a guy named Mike who called me recently. He was looking for a copy of his divorce judgment because we'd handled his divorce, and because he was headed to the Philippines because he met a girl, a woman. I hope, actually. that's from some movie or something, right? I mean, in all seriousness, though, what is a person like that? And I'm making the assumption, right? Mike's a US citizen, and there's a citizen perhaps of the Philippines or another country, just for the sake of argument. What should Mike do? I mean, because that genuinely, I think, is in my experience, is something I run into semi-frequently. He calls you, and then what happens next? Or I can just give him your number or talk through that situation, because that's not uncommon. I would guess you deal with that scenario as well, right?
Yeah, we deal with that scenario quite often.
Is that marriage-based immigration in a nutshell, or?
Yeah, it's family-based, because it can go two different ways. Mike can go to the Philippines and get engaged to this person, and then come back to the United States and petition for that person as a fiance, or Mike can go to the Philippines or a third country, get married to this person, and then come back to the US and petition for them as his spouse.
see.
These are flip sides of the same coin, different forms, different procedures, but generally the same concept. First, you have to file a certain application with US Citizenship and Immigration Services, which is under the Department of Homeland Security. So once the US CIS deems the relationship to be valid or bona fide, then it is sent over to the National Visa Center / the US Embassy for additional forms to be completed, additional forms to be furnished to the US government. And at some point, this person is going to have an interview. At the interview, the person is going to be given a visa. And upon entering the United States, in the case of a spouse, that person is going to receive a green card. Or in the case of a fiance, the law says that you have to now get married to that person within 90 days of them entering the United States. And once they have gotten married, then that person, the beneficiary, the immigrant, can now adjust their status to that of a legal permanent resident by filing additional forms in order to obtain a green card about 10 to 14 months down the road. Sometimes an interview is required, sometimes it is waived. But here's the interesting part, or the thing to keep in mind. If at the time that the US government is about to give you your green card, your marriage is less than 2 years old,
right,
then the green card you will receive is going to be a conditional green card valid for 2 years.
right.
If at the time of the issuance of the green card, the marriage is longer than 2 years, you will get a green card that is good for 10 years. I say all of that because this relates to your world.
Right.
Why? Because a lot of times, or sometimes, it so happens that the couple gets a divorce within those 2 years of the conditional permanent residence. And so the question becomes, what now? What do we do? What are my rights? What are my obligations? And so that opens a whole nother avenue of relief that could be possible or available to the beneficiary.
Yeah, this is a whole seminar by itself, but but is there a better or worse situation in the marriage based or the fiance based, right? If I'm sitting here, if I'm Mike still, and I'm unmarried to Alen over in the Philippines, right? Totally hypothetical, made up names. Is there a better move for me? Do I get married and then come back and do it that way, or do the fiance route? It's probably a deep question, but big difference or timing or preference or anything if you're advising a person, if you're advising Mike?
It used to be that the K1 fiance route was a little bit faster than the spousal route. However, the pandemic really turned everything upside down. And so at this point, I don't really tell people to do X versus Y because of the timing, because from a timing standpoint, in my humble opinion, things are superbly outside of our control. Really,
Right.
And so do not make life plans or life decisions based on when you think that the US government is going to do A, B, or C. What you should do is to say, okay, what makes sense for us as a family? What makes sense for us as a couple? For example, in the case of an individual petitioning for their spouse, we know that upon entering the United States, the beneficiary is going to receive the green card in the mail in a few weeks. Now, in the case of a individual who's petitioning for their fiance, once the person enters the United States, as we talked about, they have to still adjust their status to that of a legal permanent resident. So they will not have work authorization until at least another 5 to 7 months when the government has issued an employment authorization document. And so if money is important and you cannot just stay at home and wait for the US government to give you authorization to work,
Right.
and that is one of your main concerns, clearly now, just by virtue of that preference, you've made a decision that the spousal route is the better route, because now you will have the green card much sooner in your
I see.
hand, as opposed to if you were to pursue the fiance route.
Well, thank you for educating me on that, because it's a little deeper dive than I think I'm familiar with. I'll go into one other point, because yeah, Mike's a real former client of ours, but yeah, I'd gotten even a more recent call from a gentleman who he was married. He basically was a former divorce client. Now he'd gotten remarried, and he'd called me and, remarried to non-US citizen. And I, being semi-ignorant, I didn't know. I thought it was almost like too late. He hadn't done the process correctly. Like he needed to do it like Mike did. Mike's also real. Mike had basically, Mike must have gone the fiance route. And this other gentleman I'm talking about, whether by planning or not planning, he made a decision that he was now married to a non-US citizen. So I guess he obviously was going down the marriage-based route.
Yeah, yeah. And the marriage route is it's somewhat complex in the sense that the way that the beneficiary enters the United States, it has real implications as to what can or cannot be done. So for example, if you have somebody who enters the US without a visa or a travel document, let's say by way of the Canadian border or the Mexican border, that person cannot now easily get married to a US citizen and have a green card in 10 months or 14 months. That person is inadmissible because of the transgression, because they broke the law, right? And so they would have to qualify for a waiver or a pardon. And so that again opens another sort of can of worms, because now you have to show extreme and unusual hardship to a qualifying relative, most likely the US citizen spouse, and you have to pursue a provisional waiver. So these are the things that we grapple with day in and day out. We analyze a situation from every vantage point possible, and we determine what is the best route for this person to normalize their status in the United States within the bounds of the law.
Hey, and Alen, last little chunk on our hypothetical, and we can land the plane here. Non-US citizen spouse. What about people related to them? And I just mean, I think I called her Ellen from the Philippines. What about her children or any of her relatives? Any impact, or what might be an impact on those people's ability, I guess, to gain citizenship or legal status in the US? Just curious, because I have no idea on that point.
Yeah, so the US citizen petitioner would be able to also petition for children under the age of 21.
I see.
And one of the issues that we run into fairly consistently is because of some of the delays, some of the children age out. And so then you have to look at the CSPA, the Child Status Protection Act, where through a certain specific formula, you're able to freeze the age of the child for purposes of immigration, even though they might be 22, 22 and a half, or whatever the case might be. And so immigration law is very much fact specific. Every little detail matters. And so it takes some analysis to figure out what is the best course for a particular person. And, the same goes for family law. I would, venture to say, these are
Sure.
fact-specific areas of the law. Everything matters.
Alen, just in wrapping then, so is there a particular, I don't know, we have a woman named Monica Garcia who's our ideal client at Pro Divorce Lawyer. She's a 42-year-old realtor in Oak Park with 2 kids whose husband cheated on her, right? That's our ideal target client. Who's your kind of ideal client, and where can people find you if they need your thorough and excellent immigration legal services?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And what's funny is that some of the best referral sources for us are former clients, because not to toot our horn, but we really do go above and beyond for our clients. And so if you look us up on the internet, for example, we are somewhere between 200 and 240 or 250 reviews. Every single one of them is 5 stars. That is not to say, make a decision just based on that, but it takes so much effort to do what we do, because we really do try to treat every client as though they are essentially we are in their shoes, or make their case ours. And so a lot of former clients refer people to us in terms of an ideal client, somebody who has a family member, a friend who is going through some immigration situation. They might be in removal proceedings before the Executive Office of Immigration Review, EOIR. They might be dealing with U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. They might be somebody that wishes to become a U.S. citizen. They are already a legal permanent resident. Somebody who has been undocumented for 20 years and now has met a U.S. citizen and fallen in love. Somebody who was just victimized, and we analyzed the crime in question and whether they were able to work with law enforcement to apprehend the individual in question, the culprit in question. And so all these examples that I'm giving you is to say our clients come from every imaginable corner, from every imaginable professional, mostly former clients and people who look us up on Google. But if you want to reach out to us, our telephone number is 844-344-2628. Our website, I'm sure Peter is going to post it at some point, maybe at the bottom of the video, people can look us up. And then just look me up too, Alen Takhsh, and look up my story, my background. There's a video that we did about my background and why it is why I do what I do. And so reach out to us with any questions. We're very responsive and happy to help.
That's awesome. Yeah, the personal history of yours is super compelling. I think a prospective client, I would really be like, that's incredible, right? You've gone through this. You're not just kind of like Mr. Theoretical or something. So yeah, that's great. I know you've had great client reviews and experiences. And the website is takhshlaw.com. Thanks again for jumping on here on Lunch and a Divorce Lawyer. Alen, be well.
You too, sir. It was a pleasure. Talk to you soon.